Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Create Your Character. I'm still on my Destiny 2 grind. Last episode, I showed you how I made my shirt for my Hunter cosplay. This episode, I'm starting the armor, and I'll be beginning with the torso armor. I'm so excited to be done with sewing for now and to work with foam again. If you want to see how I go about starting this process, stick around.
Step 1 for me is pinning my pattern to my dress form. The pattern I am using is from Cosplay. She has a bunch of different armor patterns on her website, and this came in a bundle of a bunch of different breastplate patterns, and so I just picked the one that I thought would work out best as a base and went with it. And this is kind of an extra step, honestly, but I want to pin it to my dress form and make sure that it's going to have the right shape and look for my Destiny Hunter before I start cutting all the pieces out of foam. So that's kind of what I'm doing. I'm just I cut out all the pieces and now I'm taping them and pinning them to my dress form. Now that it's all pinned and attached to my dress form, I am looking at reference pictures on my phone and taking a Sharpie and making sure that I have the proper shape. So I'm just drawing any lines where I'm going to cut along the foam so I can make sure that I get the right shape of the armor that I am making. Next, I'm going to trace each of the pieces onto foam. I like using 5mm foam. There's a bunch of different thicknesses of foam that you can choose from, but this is just my personal favorite when making armor. So that's usually what I use. I'm just tracing each of the pattern pieces onto the foam, and I'm making sure that I copy all of those little dashes and making sure that I label each piece with an L for left, and then I didn't record the right side, but I put an R for all the ones that are going to be on the right side, and just made sure that they all had the proper labeling and numbers on each piece, so when I go to glue them all together, it's going to be nice and easy. I'm going to cut out all of the pieces. I'm using a box cutter for this, making sure that as I cut, I'm keeping the blade upright as much as possible, except for the pieces that have the little dots along the side. That means that the cut has to be made at an angle. It says specifically how the cut should be made on the pattern, but It's just to be at this angle so when those pieces are glued together, they give off the proper shape. But for the most part, all of the other pieces have to be cut as upright as possible. Next, I'm going to heat seal all the pieces before I glue them. So I'm just going over with my heat gun and making sure I get all the sides and edges sealed with my heat gun. I've explained this before in other videos, but to do this, or the reason you do this is because when you go over it with heat, it kind of shrinks the foam a little bit, and this makes it a lot better to glue and to paint, because otherwise the foam is kind of like a sponge and it'll kind of just absorb all of the glue and the paint. So allowing the foam to shrink that little bit makes painting and gluing so much easier and turn out a whole lot nicer. Now it's time to glue. I'm using contact cement for this. This stuff is super toxic, so always be sure to wear a mask and work in a well-ventilated area. You can't see my mask in the video, but I also have a door open and a fan blowing outside. But yeah, just going along with the glue on each of the sides, and I kind of have all the pieces laid out next to each piece that is going to get glued to. This helps me stay organized and not get confused, because you kind of do have to act fast with this, because if you wait too long, your glue's going to try and do more layers, and you can't attach them immediately after applying the glue. You do have to wait for the glue to set a little bit. It takes a little under a minute for the glue to set, so it's not too long, but it is, if you do it repeatedly, it is kind of a tedious process, so it's best just to get it on the first try. I like to do at least 2 layers of glue before attaching pieces. Sometimes I'll do 3, especially if it's like a high stress area, like on the arm or the shoulder or by a part of the body that's going to be moving, so just to make it a little bit stronger. I also like to go over each edge, well, not each edge, but a lot of times I like to go over the edges with a scrap piece of foam just to kind of level it out, and that way if there's too much glue, it'll kind of scrape off any excess. This helps with the setting time. It ensures that everything is kind of set evenly and that the pieces will be applied a lot smoother. So we are getting towards the end of this tutorial, and you may have noticed that there is still a lot that looks like needs to be done with this armor piece, and that is true. This video is kind of just going to focus on making the actual base. I tried to do the details that you can see on the front of the armor. As you can see, it's got a couple different layers, and I've tried about 3 different methods to make these layers, and none of them worked. So there has been a lot of trial and error. So I'm going to keep trying different things until I can figure out what's going to look the best. Yeah, this has been kind of difficult, but it's also been fun. So hopefully I'll be able to figure out how to make those layers that is on the armor. So that's kind of going to be its own video, and this video is really just how to make the actual base of the armor. This has been challenging, but I love working with foam and kind of doing these kind of puzzle parts of cosplay, so I'm not angry or upset or anything that I've had to go through a whole bunch of trial and error before finding something that works. And I'm really excited to finally share with you when I do find that something that is going to work. Doing curved pieces like this is when the notches in the patterns come in handy, because as long as you can get those little lines that you made lined up, the armor is going to turn out just fine. Alright, and this just about wraps up how I made one side of the armor, and you're not going to see how I made the other side of the armor because it's literally the same thing. And so here are both the pieces attached and put together without any of the details, because that'll come later.
That's all for this episode. I'm going to save all the painting and priming for when I finished all the armor pieces. I'll link any tools and patterns in the description of the video. If you've got any questions or comments, feel free to tweet me at ZTVGoofingOff with the hashtag CreateYourCharacter. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time on Goofing Off.